Jessica.
Welcome, everyone, to Everything Nonprofit Employees Need to Know About Public Service Loan Forgiveness. We have over 1,800 people who registered from all different time zones. So wherever you're tuning in from, it could be good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It's really encouraging to see so many people who want to learn about this program. Before we begin, just a little bit about the National Council of Nonprofits. Next slide. So the National Council of Nonprofits is North America's largest network of nonprofits. We represent and advocate for the 12 million nonprofit employees, including those who are tuning in today or who might be hearing about PSLF for the first time. So we encourage everyone to learn more about us at councilofnonprofits.org. We're keeping it a little bit short and sweet because we want as much time as possible with our speakers and to hear as many questions from you all. So we will be hearing first from Ashley Harrington, the Senior Advisor to the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid, followed by Betsy I'm so sorry.
Matt.
President and founder of the Institute of Student Loan Advisors, and Rich Limesider, founder and CEO of PSLF.NYC and PSLF.US. And we'll turn it now to Ashley.
Thanks, Jessica. Thank you to you and your team for having me, for putting this together, for having us, for putting this together, for all the work you've been doing to help get the word out about this very, very important opportunity, time-limited opportunity. I'm really excited to share with you today. I have a lot of content. I probably have more slides than anyone else, which is usually the case, and I think it's okay. I go through them pretty quickly. If I'm talking too fast, let me know, but I am going to try to get through things fairly quickly, so I make sure there's time for Betsy and Rich, and so that we have a lot of time at the end for questions, because we want to make sure that we are being responsive to the audience. And I think, as Rick and Jessica said, that's what's most important here, right? So let's go on to the next slide. Here today to talk about public service loan forgiveness and the limited waiver. The limited waiver is part of the Biden-Harris administration's efforts at providing targeted student loan relief, even before we announced one-time cancellation, one-time debt relief in August. We had already approved more debt cancellation than any administration ever. We are now at nearly $36 billion in cancellation for almost 1.7 million borrowers. And that includes nearly $13 billion for over 211,000 public servants through the improvements that PSLF we're going to talk about today. If you've heard about PSLF before in the past, you may have heard bad things. You may have heard it doesn't work. People get denied. You thought it's not for you. Prior to this administration, prior to this waiver, 7,000 people had gotten forgiveness. We are now at 211,000 people and growing. So when we tell you this is real, that this is real relief, that people are getting it and that you can get it too, we mean it. And we hope that you take advantage of it. Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to start off a little bit about the basics of PSLF so we can talk about what changed under the waiver so you have a better understanding of eligibility. So PSLF under normal rules, this is a flow chart that kind of lays it out. 120 qualifying payments on federal direct student loans while you're working for a qualifying employer, when you're applying for and receiving actual loan forgiveness. And at the end, whatever you have left over after that 120 is forgiven and it's not taxable income. Sounds simple, looks simple with the flow chart. Turns out it wasn't, which is how so few people were able to get forgiveness. And so we like to say you had to have the right loan with the right repayment with the right job. We'll dig into each of those pieces. Next slide. So we'll start with the right loan. It had to be a direct loan, which does include consolidation loans and Parent Plus loans. It didn't include FFEL program loans. Those are federal family education loans. These are loans that were originated by private lenders like Sallie Mae or Wells Fargo, but guaranteed by the federal government. It also didn't include loans called Perkins loans, which were originated by institutions of higher education and guaranteed by the federal government. And it didn't include any other federal or private student loan. And so PSLF was created by Congress in October of 2007. And when it was created, the FFEL program was actually the bigger program. There were way more FFEL borrowers than direct loan borrowers, but these folks weren't automatically able to get PSLF. They had to consolidate. They could consolidate into the direct loan program, but when they did that, they started at zero. They didn't get any credit for the time and repayment or employment prior to that. Even if a borrower had direct loans and consolidated for whatever reason, they started at zero. And so there was this huge issue about which type of loans qualified and how to actually get access. So we stopped making FFEL loans in 2010 and Perkins loans in 2017, 2018, but lots of folks still have these loans. We'll go to the next slide. So what for what counts towards eligible payments. What does it have to be the right payment? How does it count towards the 120? Has to be on time. Has to be made on a standard plan or any income-driven repayment plan. You may hear me say IDR or IBR interchangeably. I just mean repayment plans based on income. Has to be for at least the amount due, and it can be non-consecutive. We get a lot of questions from folks about, what if I took time off? What if I went back to school? What if I went to the private sector, then went back? It doesn't have to be 120 payments in a direct line. It can take you exactly 10 years to get to 120. It can take you 15 years. It can take you 20 years. Your journey is your journey, however long it takes you to get there. So it doesn't count if it's more than 15 days late. Doesn't count if it's made on a graduated, extended, or alternative plan. Doesn't count if it's for less than the amount due, and doesn't count if it's made when not required. So if you're in school and your loans are deferred, or you're in that grace period following when you leave school, even if you make a payment, those don't count because you're not required. Let's go to the next slide. So we talked about the right loan. We talked about the right repayment. We're going to talk about the right job. Has to be full-time, which is 30 hours a week or the equivalent. And you can be full-time at 30 hours a week for PSLF purposes, even if you're not at 30 hours a week for your employer for benefits. 30 hours a week is good. That counts as full-time for PSLF. It's all government entities, federal, state, local, tribal, territorial. It does include military. It includes all 501c3 nonprofits. I'm assuming I'm talking to a lot of 501c3 nonprofit folks, so it automatically includes all of those. It includes some other nonprofits if they provide a qualifying public service. That's things like public safety, emergency management, early childhood education, things like that. It doesn't include part-time work if it doesn't add up to full-time. You could have multiple part-time jobs, so 15 hours a week at one 501c3, another 15 hours a week at a different 501c3, and that adds up to 30 hours a week, and you're considered full-time in public service. Doesn't include volunteer work, so if you're not getting paid, doesn't count. Doesn't include any for-profit entities, no matter what you do for them, even if you're an essential worker. Doesn't include labor unions, and doesn't include partisan political organizations. The biggest thing to remember about employment is it's about the employer. It's not about the job. We're not going to ask you what you do for your nonprofit. We don't care what you do for that agency. We just want to know who pays you, who's on that W-2, and if it's one of these qualifying types. That's all that matters. We don't care how much you make. We don't care what your title is. If you work for one of these entities, you are a public servant and you are in eligible PSLF employment. Let's go to the next slide. There's also something called temporary expanded PSLF. This was created by Congress through appropriations, and it was just to help borrowers who couldn't get their loans forgiven because they had made some or all of their payments on the wrong repayment plan. So folks who had made payments on the extended or graduated plan. This is not to be confused with the limited PSLF waiver. They are different, very, very different, but there is something called TEPSLF. Let's go to the next slide. So that's how PSLF normally works under normal rules, but right now we're not in normal rules. So we have something going on right now called the limited PSLF waiver. We announced this last October, and it ends at the end of this month. It ends on October 31st, 2022. So the first big takeaway we all hope you have is that you may need to do something by October 1st to take advantage of this waiver. And basically what the waiver does is it allows borrowers to get credit for past periods of repayment that normally don't count for PSLF. So you can get credit no matter the loan program, no matter the repayment plan, no matter whether you made a payment on time, made it for the right amount. We're not looking at any of that. No matter the loan type, there are some exceptions for Parent Plus. We're not going to dig too deeply into Parent Plus today, but you can find more information on our website. But this is huge. Basically, you can get credit for payments made prior to consolidation. So even if you consolidated previously, whereas before you started at zero under the waiver, that's not the case. If you consolidate now because you still have non-direct loans, you don't start at zero. You can get credit for the time prior to consolidation. This is a big deal. That's how you get from 7,000 to 211,000. And this is not just for people who are going to get forgiveness, who are at that 120. Another million plus borrowers have gotten closer to forgiveness. The average borrower has gotten an additional year towards their 120. So they're 12 months closer to being completely debt-free. So this is huge. This is transformative. Basically, what we're asking you to do is half of the stuff I just said, well, more than half, like 90% of the stuff I just said, put it in a box, put it on a shelf. Right now, it literally doesn't matter. So if you've heard before, you had to be on this repayment plan or have this type of loan, under the waiver, not the case. We are not looking at any of that. The rules are changed right now. The employment requirements are still the same. You still had to have been employed full-time for a qualifying employer when those prior payments were made. But we just want to know if you were in something called active repayment status, which we define very generously. You could have even been technically delinquent. As long as you weren't in default, you can get credit. We're even counting some periods of deferment and forbearance, and we'll talk about that shortly. But you have to act now. If you still have FEL or Perkins loans, if you still have non-direct loans, you have to consolidate those by 1031. If you've never applied for PSLF, you have to do that by 1031. And Betsy's going to go into more detail about what that looks like in a bit. Let's go to the next slide. So this is a chart that just kind of lays out the difference side by side, the big picture differences between the waiver and normal rules. Under normal rules, you can only get credit on direct loans. Under the waiver, you can get credit on direct, on FEL, on Perkins, all of them. Under normal rules, you had to have made payments on the standard plan or an IDR plan. Under the waiver, any plan counts, literally any plan. Under normal rules, they had to be on time, in full payments. Under the waiver, doesn't matter if it was late, doesn't matter if it was for the right amount, you could have missed that month, you can get credit. Under normal rules, and here's a big one, you can only get forgiveness if you were working for a qualifying employer at the time you applied for and actually got your loan forgiven. Under the waiver, you can be retired, you can be in the private sector, you don't have to be working for a qualifying employer to get forgiveness. So if you're retired or no longer in public service, but you already have 120, now is also the time to apply. So if you know folks who are in that situation, tell them to apply now because they can get their loans forgiven even though they're technically not working in public service. Let's go to the next slide. So you might fall into one of three borrower groups. You might only have direct loans. If you only have direct loans, you just need to get at least one PSLF form in by October 31st. And Betsy's going to talk more about that. You don't necessarily have to worry about consolidating if you only have direct loans. If you only have direct loans, you really only want to worry about consolidating if you have loans that have been in repayment for different periods. So if you went to undergrad, then took time off, went into public service, came back and went to grad school. And so your undergrad loans have like 30 months worth of payments and your grad loans have like 10. If you consolidate now under the waiver, your new consolidation loan, the entire thing will get those 30 months at least. So you could potentially get your grad loans forgiven sooner. If you previously consolidated to direct loan program, you want to submit forms for the time prior to consolidation so you can get that credit. If you still have FEL or Perkins loans, you have the most to do because you've got to consolidate and get at least one PSLF form in by 1031. Let's go to the next slide. So I do want to flag some things about consolidation because we are encouraging so many folks to consolidate and there are major benefits to consolidating right now, but there are some things that you should also know. So first, when you consolidate, you're getting a new loan. And so your monthly payment could change. Now, for some folks, it could go down, but it also could go up. And that's because if you no longer have a partial financial hardship, you could lose access to some of the more affordable income-based plans. If you have unpaid interest and fees, they're going to get capitalized. So your principal balance is going to be higher. Your new consolidation loan is going to have a new interest rate. It'll be based on a weighted average of the loans you consolidated. And you don't have to consolidate all of your federal student loans. When you go to consolidate, you can pick and choose which loans to consolidate. That's particularly important because we do want to flag that while you do have to consolidate non-direct loans by October 31st to take advantage of the waiver, if you still have non-direct loans that are commercially owned, so commercially owned FEL or Perkins loans that are still owned by private lenders, so you weren't on the payment pause, they're not now owned by Department of Education, and you consolidate now, you could lose eligibility for one-time debt relief. You can find out more at one-time debt relief, and we'll talk about that briefly next. But for PSLF, if you have non-direct loans, you're going to need to consolidate them. And keep in mind, once you do that, once you consolidate them, that loan is dispersed, you can't undo it. Let's go to the next slide. So I mentioned we're also counting some deferments and forbearances. Under the waiver, and because of something called the IDR adjustment that we announced in April and we're implementing later this year and next year, we're also counting periods of long-term forbearance. So we define that as 12 or more months consecutive, 36 or more months cumulative, deferments prior to 2013, except in-school deferments, economic hardship deferments, and some military-related forbearances and deferments. If you weren't active duty status and your loans were in forbearance or deferment, you can get credit. So for all of these, we're giving credit automatically, either now or later this year or next year, but you still are going to have to submit PSLF forms and certify employment for those periods, and Betsy will talk about that. And while it's not automatic, you can also get credit for some periods of short-term forbearances by submitting a complaint to your servicer. Let's go to the next slide. So quick recap, take advantage of the waiver. You want to confirm your employer is qualified, and we're going to talk about how to do that. Consolidate your loans if you need to, and submit a form and do it all by a PSLF form and do it all by October 31st. There's still plenty of time, I promise you that, but we don't want people to wait. Take advantage of this now. This is a life-changing opportunity. You don't want to miss out on this opportunity for leave. You don't want to wait till the last minute. Next slide. So to apply for PSLF, it's the same application it's always been. If you've ever applied for PSLF, you've seen that form that we have. You used our help tool, and we're really encouraging folks to use our help tool, which you can find at studentaid.gov/PSLF. This is what the landing page looks like. I'm going to leave it to Betsy to go in more depth on what you'll need for that. Let's go to the next slide. The best place to go for information about the waiver is studentaid.gov/PSLF waiver. For the help tool, studentaid.gov/PSLF, that's where you're going to go to apply. And then you'll submit your form to MOHELA. For general PSLF information, studentaid.gov/public service. Oh, this is an out-of-date slide. I'm so sorry. Still says Fed Loan Servicing. The servicer is MOHELA. We will update this before we send it out. Please don't send this out, Jessica. Let's go to the next slide. I want to talk briefly about one-time debt relief because we want to make sure folks know that they are separate applications. They are separate programs. You can apply for both, but there are some considerations. So I'm briefly going to talk about this. Next slide. In August, the Biden-Harris administration announced that we are doing more than ever on student loans. We are providing one-time debt relief of up to $20,000 for borrowers who received a Pell Grant, up to $10,000 for borrowers who did not receive a Pell Grant. And this is for low and middle income borrowers who made less than $125,000 a year as a single person or $250,000 a year as a married couple. It's based on your 2020 or 2021 AGI, adjusted gross income. And so this is available for a lot of folks. Again, you can apply for both. You can find out more at studentaid.gov/debt relief. You can get both, but keep in mind what we talked about consolidations and commercial loans. So if you still have commercial loans, you are not going to be eligible for debt relief on those loans. If you have previously consolidated those by September 29th, you would be eligible, but you can get both. You don't have to just apply for one or the other, but they are separate applications. Next slide. Most federal student loans are eligible: undergraduate or grad, parent plus and grad, consolidation loans, Fell and Perkins loans held by ed, defaulted loans. So the way I like to think about it is if your loans have been on the payment pause, you've not been accruing interest, you've not had to make payments since March of 2020, your loans are eligible for the one-time relief. Let's go to the next slide. That application is available now. We just actually officially released it Monday. The beta application went live this weekend. You can find it at studentaid.gov/debt relief/application. Still confirming these are separate programs, but you can benefit from both. And keep in mind that PSLF is not capped by income. It's not capped by amount. So the average relief for PSLF is 50 or 60K. Borrowers are getting 100K or 200K forgiven, not just the 10 or 20K, but you can get both. All of this is transformative relief, and we want borrowers to get all of the relief that they can access. So apply for both. Apply for the one that makes sense to you. Look at your loans. Think about what you need to do. You have a year to apply for one-time debt relief, a year from when payments resume, which is now the end of December. They start after December 31st, but for PSLF, you have until October 31st. So that's why we're really focused on that. This is time sensitive. We don't want anyone to miss out on any of these opportunities, but PSLF, you have until 10/31. Let's go to the next slide. For the waiver, remember, PSLF will still exist after 10/31. So even if you're not at 120, you can benefit. But to get this extra credit, to get these waiver benefits, you want to apply by 10/31. It's the difference between having, even if it just means 5 additional months, that's 5 fewer months you're in repayment later on. Take advantage of that. It makes the light at the end of the tunnel feel that much closer, and you feel like you can finally get out of debt. Here are some debt relief resources. studentaid.gov/debt relief/application for the application. For general information, studentaid.gov/debt relief. And next slide, I think these are just, I'm gonna turn it over to Betsy, and we will have time for questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm a bit of a control freak, so I'm asking for the ability to control my own slides. If I can't, I'll build a bridge and get over it. So I'm here to reemphasize some of the really important points that Ashley made, as well as to explain how to apply for public service loan forgiveness. So to be clear, technically, you don't have to apply for PSLF until you have the 120 eligible payments. I'm here to tell you that that's a terrible, terrible strategy, especially with this one-time temporary waiver that we have in place for PSLF. So under normal or traditional PSLF rules, what you would do is once you hit, excuse me, your 120th payment, you would submit the PSLF form. And as Ashley pointed out, there's only one PSLF form. No matter what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to certify your employment, whether you're trying to apply for actual forgiveness, or whether you're applying for the temporary extension of PSLF that Ashley mentioned before, if you find a federal form that says PSLF on it, it's the right form. So once you've hit the 120, you would submit the application for forgiveness. We do recommend, however, that you don't wait till the end. We strongly recommend that you get in the habit of submitting your proof of eligible employment on an annual basis. Here's why. First of all, it's not until you submit proof of eligible employment that Mohila, who's the current PSLF servicer, is actually going to start counting your PSLF payments. And the reason that's important is until they start doing that, you won't have confirmation that your employer counts, that your loans are the right kind of loans, and that you're on the right repayment plan. People that we talked to that thought they were on track for PSLF, only to find out when they thought they had their 10 years in already, that they had 0 years in, were people that waited till the end to submit their proof of eligible employment. So once again, I can't recommend strongly enough that you get your proof of eligible employment that you've already worked up to now before October 31st. And then you get, if that doesn't bring you to the 120, that you get in the habit of submitting a year's worth of proof of eligible employment on an annual basis to make sure that you're on track. If your account, the first time you submit proof of eligible employment, they're going to transfer your account over to the PSLF servicer, which, as we've mentioned, is Mohila. If your account's already at Mohila, if you upload, you can log into your account and just upload your form and get confirmation pretty much right away that they've received it. Now, right now, about 10 days out to the end of the temporary waiver, it's a little bit of a squirrely period and a little bit of an anxious period. For borrowers that don't already have accounts with Mohila, they've had to either snail mail or fax that application over to Mohila, and you might not get confirmation right away that it's been received. For the purposes of the waiver, as long as the application was either signed off on by your employer by October 31st or created on the PSLF help tool, and those forms are eventually approved, you don't have to worry about actually getting confirmation that the form's been received and processed by the 31st for you to get credit under the temporary waiver. Now, when you first submit your first version of eligible employment to Mohila, they're going to start counting your payments. Right now, it's taking about an average of 120 days. Some people it's happening quicker. Some people it's taking a lot longer for various reasons. But the average or median is about 120 days. You'll get, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, you're going to get a letter in the mail once they do that count, and even better, you'll be able to log into your account whenever you like and be able to see what your current public service loan forgiveness count is. Now, after the waiver is over and after loans resume repayment in January, when you submit an application there's a box that you can check that says, I think I've got forgiveness. If you check that box, what they do is they'll put your account on hold while they do the review. And remember, the review can take a couple months. And during those months, you actually won't get credit for further PSLF payments. So you can choose to not have that hold put on your account if you're not going to hit the 120 until after, say, January. You can choose not to do that. Let them do your count. Excuse me. I apologize. Allergies. I'm allergic to bureaucracy. So you can choose not to have your account put in forbearance and continue to accrue PSLF payments during that review if you want to. And I don't think they gave me permission. So please go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about filling out the form. Trust the tool. Ashley did an awesome job explaining the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help Tool, which is at studentaid.gov. That tool does a bunch of really neat things that will really help you on your PSLF journey. Number one, it's attached to a database of all the employers that have already been vetted by the Department of Education as PSLF eligible employers. So if anybody that you work with or who has ever worked at your employer has ever submitted a PSLF form in the past, and it went through the process and the Department of Education did their full vetting and went, yep, this counts, it'll go in the database and you'll know right away if your employer is eligible. But keep in mind, this database is not exhaustive. So if, for example, if you work for a smaller nonprofit, you might be the very first person to ever submit a PSLF form. So if you put your employer's employer identification number or EIN number into the tool and it goes, we're not sure if it's eligible, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not eligible. It could just mean that no one before you's ever submitted it before. By the way, if you don't know where to get your employer's EIN number, the first place you can try looking is their website under the About Us section. If not, your HR department, your accounting department, accounting/finance department, or your legal department will all be able to tell you what your employer's EIN number is. Another tip is if you work for a 501c3 nonprofit, you can go to a website called GuideStar and do a search of the name of your employer, and it should bring up a quick profile of your employer that will include that employee identification number. My final resource for EIN is the IRS. IRS.gov, you do a search for charity search, and you can put in the name and the city and state, and it'll give you a list that will include that EIN number. But again, if you put the EIN number in and the help tool goes, it doesn't mean that all is lost. It just could mean that no one before you has ever submitted that employer before. Here's the other thing the tool does. The tool can help reduce errors. So it helps you pre-populate a lot of the fields that are on the form, which makes the likelihood of rejection much, much less. The final thing that the tool does is if you generate your form through that tool, it places this weird little code at the bottom of the form. And that having that code at the bottom of the form can reduce the processing time of the form, because the people that process it see that it has gone through the tool and some of it has therefore already been blessed. So it can reduce the total processing time. The last thing I want to mention about the tool, which I'm going to talk about again in a few minutes, is the waiver deadline. So we know the waiver deadline is October 31st. And as I mentioned before, it doesn't mean you have to get everything processed by then. It just means it has to be submitted. Well, the tool can give you a little extra wiggle room. If you create a form on the PSLF tool that by October 31st, that is eventually submitted and approved, that will slide you in right under that waiver umbrella. I'm not suggesting that you test that theory and that you wait as long as possible. But if you are having trouble, for example, getting proof of employment from a prior employer or a current employer, don't fret. Use the tool by the 31st to generate the form, and then get it in as fast as you can after that point. Another thing I want to mention is, this slide is called Trust the Tool. It's called Trust the Tool for a reason. I see this happen often with very large nonprofits as well as government employers. Oftentimes there will be multiple addresses for the entity, and maybe the address, when you punch your EIN number into the tool, it might pop up with an address that's not the one that you walk into every single day. Don't worry about it. Don't change it. Leave it alone. Trust the tool as far as the address. and any other sort of pre-population information it puts in. Another good example is the name of your employer. If you type in the EIN and it gives you a name that's maybe a little off than the name that you're used to, but it's pretty much the same, like it's your employer, leave it be. Don't make any changes to it. Making changes to the address and the name of the employer that's been pre-populated by the tool can be fraught with peril. And as long as the information isn't outright wrong, then you don't have to worry about it. Next slide, please. Okay, here's what you can expect once you submit your proof of eligible employment. Right now, under the waiver in particular, for most people, there's actually 2 phases of the review, and it can freak people out a little bit. So there's the data that Mohila already has in-house, which for all intents and purposes, for most people is basically going to be your payment history since your loan was with Mohila. Now, for some people, that could be years and years of history, but for a lot of PSLF borrowers, it's just going to be a small window of time up till now. So when they do their initial review, chances are it may only be with the data they have in-house. So the first letter you get in the mail or the first time you check your account, it might say you've got 3 payments. And that can be anxiety inducing, especially if you think you've got 10 years of payments and maybe you just recently consolidated, or maybe you just recently raised your hand for PSLF for the first time. So your account is recently transferred to Mohila. Don't freak out. At some point within a few weeks, or maybe a little longer, the Department of Education is going to send over the data they have, and they have all the things. The Department of Education has a history of your loan back to the moment it was created, even if it was created 17 consolidations ago. They don't have all the gory details, but they have what's important, which is the months that your loans were in repayment, and the months that you were in forbearance, and the months that you were in deferment, and the months that you were in default. Once Mohila gets that data from the Department of Education, they're going to do another review. And that's when you're going to get the letter that's most likely going to reflect the most accurate PSLF count to date. Now, remember, only months where you actually worked full-time for eligible employment are going to count for PSLF, and that's under the waiver as well as under traditional rules. Also remember that months that you were in default do not count for PSLF, either under the waiver or under traditional PSLF rules. So keep that in mind. A third thing I want to remind you of is, as Ashley alluded to, there's another waiver coming called the income-driven plan waiver or the income-driven plan adjustment. It hasn't happened yet. And that's the one that's going to possibly count some of your forbearances, some of your pre-2013 deferments, and so on. So if you're getting your review now, don't expect to see those forbearances or deferments in there. And again, it's not that they made an error. It's just that the IDR waiver or adjustment hasn't happened yet. And for some people may not happen until next summer. Some people might see it sooner, but some people might not see that until next summer. Now, along the same lines of the don't freak out part, if you recently consolidated to take advantage of the PSLF waiver, your initial count is probably going to be 0. Because remember, Mohila, the first review Mohila is doing is probably only going to, unless you lucked out timing-wise for a file transfer, it's only going to reflect the data that Mohila has in-house. And they're not going to have any of your pre-consolidation data. So when you fill out a consolidation application, there's a scary message on it that says, hey, if you consolidate, it's going to reset your PSLF count to 0. And that's true under traditional PSLF rules, but under the waiver, it's not. So you can ignore the language on the application and don't freak out when you get your initial count post-consolidation if it happens to say 0, because again, they're just waiting for the pre-consolidation data to come from the Department of Education. Now, there are millions of pieces of paper coming in to Mohila right now. And unfortunately, a lot of them, my understanding is about a third of them are duplicate forms, which certainly doesn't increase the efficiency of the process. So once you submit your stuff, you need to put your patience pants on and tighten the belt on those patience pants. As I mentioned before, the average processing time is 120 days, but there's a big data stretch on either side of that. Some people it happens quicker. There's a lot of people it took a lot longer. So just be prepared. Now, if it looks like you're going to have forgiveness once they do process, but it also looks like you're not going to get processed until after repayments restart come January, you have a couple options. Option number one, call the servicer and ask for a forbearance in January. That'll put your account on hold. No more payments will be due, and you can wait and get your forgiveness count or your denial, whichever it's going to be. Option number two is keep making your payments. If you turns out you did hit the 120 and you have forgiveness, they'll automatically refund you any payments made over 120, as long as all those extra payments were made after a consolidation. Now, after all is said and done, if you still think your payment count is wrong, they do have a reconsideration process that you can utilize to ask them to reevaluate your count. Now, to be clear, this reconsideration process is only to ask them to reevaluate your count. It's not for if you don't like the rules or if you don't agree with the rules, if they denied your employer because, let's say, it was a for-profit, but you think it should count. That's not what the reconsideration process is for. It's only if you think they made their account incorrectly. And next slide. Okay, so just to recap, when it comes to the October 31st deadline, if you need to consolidate, you only have to have submitted a consolidation application by October 31st to fall in under the waiver. You also have to have submitted at least one period of eligible employment by October 31st. Now, by submitted, they mean either the application has reached MOHELA, or it could mean that you generated a form through the PSLF tool by the 31st, and that form is eventually approved. The third option is that your employer has signed off on the form by October 31st, and that form is eventually approved. Now, keep in mind, there is a stale date when it comes to signatures. They cannot accept a signature that is more than 60 days old. Was there anything else I wanted to mention? I just want to reiterate that you can, what Ashley said, you can apply for both the broad debt relief as well as PSLF. There's nothing, one won't necessarily interfere with the other. I also want to remind you that once the waiver is over, so essentially when payments resume in January, if you're not at 120, you have to follow the traditional PSLF rules. The most important thing is, under those, is make sure you're on the correct repayment plan to accrue the rest of your payments. And that means either any of the income-driven plans or a 10-year standard plan. If you consolidate your loans and don't choose an income-driven plan, they're going to put you on what's called the standard consolidation plan. That does not count under traditional PSLF rules. They're counting it under the temporary waiver, but any payments you need to accrue after January, you cannot be on the standard consolidation plan. And I think, who needs to consolidate? So, because not everybody does, but everybody seems to think they have to. If you have all direct loans and they've all been in repayment for the same period of time, you don't need to consolidate in order to get credit under the PSLF waiver or get credit for extra payments. If you have Feller Perkins loans, or if you have loans with different periods of repayment, you do need to consolidate and you need to submit that application by 10/31. And I think that's all I had for people. Let's go over to our good friend, Rich.
Thanks, Betsy. Hi, everyone. I'm going to introduce myself in a second, and I'm so glad to be here with all of you. Really thrilled to have been invited by the National Council of Nonprofits, and everyone who's on this call and who's watching after the fact, who's listening to the recording, should really know that between Betsy and Ashley, you all have the all-stars of the field here. You know, Betsy is one of the real experts, fighters, been working to help people understand how to get through student loan forgiveness for a long time. And Ashley has been an amazing advocate, has helped build this program with a terrific team at the US Department of Education. And so there's really not that much I can add from a technical perspective to all the important information that you've already heard. But I want to share a couple of things that I think maybe I can add. And one narrow thing to start with is if you have questions, even if you've already typed in a question to the Q&A or you're sticking around to hear the questions at the end, some of the questions that have already been typed have been answered. So before typing in a new question right now, or if you're still waiting to get your own question answered, I'd recommend clicking over to the Answered Questions tab. Take a look and see which questions have already been answered. Yours might be in there already, or someone might have asked a similar question. The second thing I want to say before diving in just to a few slides, and it really is just a few, is I got my loans forgiven in May, and I didn't know any of this. So I also want to share that while there's really important information about many details of the program, it is also true, as you've heard from Betsy and from Ashley, that hundreds of thousands of people have already had their loans forgiven. Maybe 1 million or more have already gotten through the application process, haven't quite gotten their loans forgiven, but have done what they need to for the application process, and never had one-on-one coaching, never really understood the ins and outs of the laws. I often tell people that I think about the PSLF program at this point the way I think about my cell phone. I don't really understand exactly how my cell phone works, but it works for me and it got the job done. And I am here to tell you that back in November of 2021, I applied for PSLF without knowing any of these details, but still powered through the process, got the forms in, and woke up on May 11th with no more student debt. So my name's Rich Lime Cider. I always tell folks if there was a drink made out of limes, it would be lime cider. And I've been in the nonprofit sector my whole career. I was running a immigration nonprofit until a few months ago, working with children in the New York City area who were getting deported. And my career has been made possible because of some really wonderful but very expensive higher education opportunities. I did know about the PSLF program. I did submit my application in 2018. And for one of those reasons that you heard about, I was rejected. I hadn't gotten my paperwork straight in 2008. And because of that, I wasn't given credit for 10 years of public service work that I had done starting back in 2008. But because of this PSLF waiver, because of this magical time period that we're in and that you've been hearing about, I heard about the changes, I resubmitted an application, and I got a notice May 11th, 2022, telling me that because the program had been modified, and the way it's modified for exactly the next 13 days, I no longer have student debt. If we could go to the next slide. So I got religion, basically. I saw the light on that date, and I reached out, got to know Betsy and Ashley pretty shortly after that. I'm not a student loan expert. I'm not a financial counselor. I'm an enthusiastic person who couldn't believe that my student debt went away, and have been very lucky now to work with an incredible group of organizations, individuals across the country. We started by launching PSLF.NYC and then PSLF.US. And our mission is to get the word out to more than 5 million Americans who work for nonprofits or government agencies, altogether have $200 billion in loans that could be forgiven under the PSLF program. And the biggest obstacle to getting this message out there is that, frankly, at the end of the day, in my opinion, everything that's great about this program also sounds like a scam. Special government program, click here, consolidate your loans, you can save thousands of dollars. I got an email like that last week in my inbox. It was not good. And so as proud as I am of our coalition, of the PSLF.US group, we made this thing up 4 months ago. No one's really heard from us. If we want to help people get over that line, and so not only am I thrilled that you all are here on this call today, but I'm also really excited about the opportunity that we have that you can bring this message to your organizations, to your colleagues, to your friends and family, because you know this is real and they need to hear it from someone they trust. The PSLF waiver is a real thing. It's a special opportunity. You can go to the next slide. It's a special opportunity, and we've got 13 days left before the program goes back to the old version of itself, which really wasn't working for a lot of people. So I just want to show you here what that help tool prints out. This is my wife's form. Because my loans were forgiven, I can't use the help tool anymore. But this is my wife's PSLF help tool form. It prints out a page that lets you know about your own loans, and then it pre-prints those forms that you need to get signed by your employers. So it says right here, thanks for using the help tool. Here's where you mail it. You can show the next slide. Tells you a little bit about what you might need to do next. It'll let you know if you need to consolidate your loans. My wife didn't need to consolidate her loans because hers were already of that direct type. So you can see at the bottom that the loans she has are direct consolidation loans, so she doesn't need to consolidate them again. You can go to the next slide. And this was my inbox. This was what I saw over the course of a number of months last year and this year. Again, I told you, I'm that sort of nerdy guy who did know that they had tried to change the program. They'd tried to make some fixes. And so on November 3rd, I got my updated package in. There are still some automated systems in place that are built on the old version of the program. And so I was essentially rejected from the PSLF program within a month. By November 30th, I got a letter saying, oh no, you don't qualify. Well, I knew that the government was building in new systems, that the loan servicers are trying to manage a really increased number of applications. And so frankly, I tried to do what Betsy said. I put my patience pants on. I don't think I've ever heard that before, but I think I'm going to start using it. And I didn't sweat it. I never called customer service. I didn't try to file any kind of appeal. I just waited. By March, I got a letter saying, oh, actually, we do think you qualify for the program. We think you've done about 5 years of public service. Again, I knew they were still going through the forms. I was going to give them a chance to get it done. By April, they reached out and told me they saw 7 years of public service. And on May 11th, I got that incredible notice. And you can go to the next slide. Got that incredible notice. Hey, you've reached 120 payments. You've reached your 10 years. I ran over to my computer, and this is the screenshot from my student aid loan account. My loan balance is 0. A pretty incredible and exciting, life-changing thing for me and my family. So next slide. So really the only message I have is because we've gotten so much great information from Betsy and Ashley, and we'll stick around for I know we'll stick around for Q&A for a few minutes. Please help. I'm so glad you're here. For every person on this call, there are literally 100 who still need to hear the message, and there is time. PSLF.gov is where you can get information from the federal government. Our campaign is PSLF.us, and we have built very specific tools for you to be able to share with friends, but especially with your colleagues, with your HR department or your staff. We've got another webinar going on tomorrow, another one Thursday night. We're running office hours for individual borrowers on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the next couple of weeks. If you're with an organization and you want to know how to support your colleagues or what you can send to HR, or maybe you are HR or the leader, email my colleague, Hannah, at pslf.nyc. And we're going to get you some tools. We'll get you sample emails. We'll get you a social media toolkit. We want to help everyone who's interested spread the word as far as we can. And then follow and post and support as much of this stuff on social media as you can. Frankly, it doesn't have to be ours. If you can retweet and repost things that Betsy, that Ashley in the Department of Ed or the federal government are putting out there, anything you see that spreads the word and helps people understand that the public service loan forgiveness program is real. It's a big deal, and we only have 13 days left, is a tremendous help. So I'm grateful to be here with you all. I'm thrilled that I got to sit on a panel with these all-stars, and I think that's it for me. Is there another slide, or is that it? No, that's it.
Thanks, Rich.
Great.
We only have about maybe just a little under 10 minutes, but I think a lot of the questions have been covered one way or another in the last 2 presentations. And I think some of the questions, I'll just do like a quick rapid fire round to cover sort of broad PSLF questions. and try to address other more specificities around the application and everything in between. So the first one that we had was just to combine two, and anyone can jump in any time, kind of we can alternate between one. So I guess the first one I'll direct it towards Betsy is, are all 501c3s eligible? And does a person have to be an employee, or do contractors apply?
Oh, I love the question. Yes, all 501c3 nonprofits are eligible. However, you do have to be a direct employee of any of the PSLF employers for it to count. And it's possible that the contractor themselves are PSLF eligible employers. In my experience, they tend not to be. They tend to be for-profits. But, you could walk into a government building every day, sit at a government desk, answer a government phone. But unless that government agency or that nonprofit actually considers you a direct employee of theirs, I'm afraid it's not going to count. Now, that could change in the future. There was a proposal floating around. We're waiting to see how that shakes out. But as of right now, no, that doesn't count.
Awesome, thanks. And I guess I'll direct this one towards Ashley. So what provisions are there if we're having trouble getting a response from a previous employer to complete the PSLF form, or if the nonprofit has permanently closed?
It's a great question. So first, reminder for the waiver, you just need to get one form in, and you can do it by the help tool by October 31. And remember, you can get it signed later. We prefer you to get your form signed by your employers, but if you absolutely can't because they close or they don't keep records that long, you can submit your W-2 or copies of pay stubs and deposit records to show that you were employed with that employer. But your best bet is to get a signature. And remember, just get one in by 1031, and you can do the rest later.
Awesome, thanks. And I guess for anyone, if you have not paid any student loans since the COVID-19 moratorium went into effect, would I still be applicable to apply for PSLF? Rich?
Yeah, and I think I know, and this is also sort of in the Q&A, a couple of things. So yes, one of the real loosenings, one of the more forgiving elements of the PSLF waiver is that many, many more periods of time qualify. And I think Ashley spoke about this, really nicely. So apply. If you have any question like that, any of these broad eligibility questions, am I in the right job? Did I make the right payments? Frankly, the answer is apply. Apply, apply, apply. Go to that help tool. We're talking about a 20 to 30 minute process by October 31st that in some cases is releasing people of $300,000 worth of student debt. Now, in a very narrow technical answer to that question, I also want to flag that because of the broad pause on making payments under student loans for most student loan borrowers over the past 3 years, the federal government is giving credits for all of those past 3 years. If you didn't have to make payments, but you voluntarily made payments to the federal government, you are going to get credit whether you made a $0 payment or whether you made your full dollar amount payment by choice. You can get a rebate, a refund of the payments you made to your loan servicer over the past couple of years. And that may be a good idea if you think you're close to PSLF loan forgiveness. So in other words, over the past 2 years, if you chose to send your servicer $5,000, $10,000 voluntarily, you can get them to send you that money back. You put it in your pocket, they add it to your principal, but then the larger amount of loans wind up getting forgiven. So for folks who've made voluntary payments, it might be worth exploring getting a rebate on those payments for the past couple of years.
That's absolutely right. I just want to hammer that home because people never believe me. So basically, we have not had to make payments since March of 2020. If you were able to maintain eligible PSLF employment, you can get credit for every single one of those months, even if you did not, even though we have not had to make a payment. So that's 30 plus months. You did not have to make a payment. If you were able to, if you certify your employment, that's 30 plus months towards your 120, and you're more than a fourth of the way towards PSLF forgiveness. Literally. If you made payments because you thought you had to, or you were just trying to make progress, you can get that money back.
May sound too good to be true, but honestly, it's true. Can't stress that enough. One other question I think that sort of came up in all the Q&A is just a quick recap on what exactly consolidation means for PSLF. Not sure who wants to take that one.
So consolidation means that this is for folks who still have non-direct loans. If you have non-direct loans, the only way you can actually get PSLF is if you consolidate. So you want to do that by 1031 because it's for direct loans. But under the waiver, whereas before you would start at zero, like you wouldn't get credit, under the waiver, you can get credit for the time prior to consolidation. So that's why you want to consolidate now. If you still have commercial loans, keep in mind it could impact your one-time debt relief, but for PSLF purposes, you're going to have to consolidate to get the credit and to get PSLF if you have non-direct loans.
And of course, that's right. And I just want to add that the consolidation point is often the place that most people that I'm talking to hesitate. It feels financially, it feels like the thing, oh my, what, can I make a bad decision here? What, I don't want to mess anything up. For the vast majority of student loan borrowers, consolidation is a very boring and ordinary part of the process. The federal government held your loans before, the federal government is going to hold your loans afterwards. As Ashley said, your interest rate isn't going to change, even if you had multiple loans with different interest rates.
Well,
When they get smushed together, it's going to be a weighted average.
Mhm.
So it's not going to have an impact on you. What you're going to read as the rate is going to be different, but the consequences for you, it's just a weighted average of the interest rates you've had. And that with the caveats that if you have if you have commercial loans, if you are currently in default, you probably do not want to consolidate without getting some one-on-one support. And if you only have Parent Plus debt, you might want to get some added guidance before you move forward, because you may wind up resetting with a different payment amount if you're consolidating Parent Plus loans only. But for the vast majority of folks, consolidation, very ordinary part of the process.
And I guess one last question before we kind of go into closing thoughts. Is there an agency that can help with the paperwork and filling out this form that is not going to take advantage of you? I think we have all seen alerts about scams. So I think we just want to reassure folks on what is the best way to get help with this form.
Yeah.
I'd like to take this. Don't pay anybody. Please, please, please don't pay anybody to help you with this paperwork. It's very straightforward. And if you have questions, there is a ton of free resources out there. Studentaid.gov has FSA chat. Mohila can help you. My organization, which is the Institute of Student Loan Advisors, we provide free counseling via email. Please don't pay anybody. It's not going to get you PSLF any faster or get you eligibility when you normally wouldn't have it.
Right. So we are at the top of the hour. Any other resource that you can point folks to keep asking questions before the October 31st deadline? Just a quick heads up, studentaid.gov/PSLF. But for others, what are some other resources you recommend?
So, shameless plug. I would like to think that our PSLF page is very comprehensive and in plain English, and it contains there's a linked FAQ document there with a lot of case studies and examples that a lot of people have found helpful. This re-emphasizing the studentaid.gov/PSLF website. They also have a ton of awesome FAQs with some examples that people find really helpful.
Yeah, so definitely check out our website, studentaid.gov/PSLF waiver, a ton of information there. The White House also has a great website, PSLF.gov, that has a few simple click-through steps that can help you determine what you should do. But I think all of our advice is simple, and I think Rich said it, just apply, right? The best advice we can give you is, if your question is, should I? If it starts with should I, our answer is pretty much going to be yes. If your answer is, does this count? Our answer is pretty much going to be most likely yes, and all you should do is apply and find out, right? It can literally, for most folks, only help you. Even if you only get 5 additional payments, that's 5 fewer months that later on you don't have to be burdened by student debt. Take advantage of this. This is incredible. We are doing so much on student loans, and one-time debt relief is incredible, but so is this. Take advantage of all of it. Don't miss out. This is an opportunity. Get the EIN, go to the help tool, consolidate your loans if you need to. It's that simple. And I don't even think it takes 20 or 30 minutes, Rich. If you have the EIN, I think it takes a little bit shorter.
I'm with you. It doesn't take that
It doesn't
long.
take 20 minutes. Don't scare the folks. You can do it.
It really does not take that long. I did that just a few days ago, and it really does not take that long.
Also, if you're looking for like a PSLF support group, there is a PSLF sub on reddit.com that's a really good community. The moderators, I am one of the moderators, just to be transparent about it. I tend not to moderate very much though. But it's a really supportive community of your fellow PSLF people.
Support group. That's nice.
Right. Well, thank you so much to all of you for joining this call, to everyone who tuned in, for asking as many questions as possible. There's still a lot to learn about this. We have just about 13 days left. So everyone, please, as soon as you can, spread the word, tweet, share as many resources as possible. This is a team effort. So yeah, have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.